That was a mouthful.
Yeah, it certainly was. I hope it made sense.
There'll be a test at the end of the
Exactly.
segment,
There'll be a
folks.
quiz when we're done. And not only that, but now we're going to lay some new information on top of all of this, because you have put out a new memo today that highlights an email that Susan Rice, advisor to President Obama, wrote to herself on Inauguration Day 2017. Can you explain to us what you found there?
Yes, I found an odd and disturbing email from Susan Rice. At 12:15 on January the 20th, the day of the inauguration, she emails herself about a meeting that occurred on January the 5th in the Oval Office, and she says in the email that the president was being briefed by the intelligence community about Russian hacking in the 2016 election, and had a follow-on brief meeting with Sally Yates, Jim Comey, herself, and Vice President Biden, and she quotes what the president said. Now, this is an email to herself about a meeting with the president on January the 5th. President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue, the Russian investigation, is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement community by the book, in parentheses, by the book. The president stressed that he is not asking about, initiating, or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book. So she's sending herself an email talking about a conversation on January the 5th with the president, reassuring herself and I guess the president that this would be done by the book. I think that's odd and disturbing, because we know that the investigation regarding the Trump campaign was anything but by the book.
So why do you think has she responded to your letter, first of all?
We sent a letter to her saying, did you email yourself? Usually if you email yourself, it's about to pick up something, not about a conversation that seems to be very self-serving. When the president's telling the law enforcement intel community, when you look at Trump associates, do it by the book. This meeting was on January the 5th. The email was sent on January the 20th. So what I'm worried about is it's an effort by the president to basically get himself on the record through Susan Rice to make sure that from his point of view, everything was done by the book. The question is, did the president know anything about the FISA warrant application? Did Susan Rice know that the warrant application included a dossier from Mr. Steele when he was on the payroll of the Democratic Party, coming from Russian sources, that he was a political operative being paid by the Democratic Party, and that the information in the FISA warrant application was a dossier that was political in nature, and that Mr. Steele hated President Trump, candidate Trump, and was trying to do everything he could to beat him? That's not exactly by the book.
You know, it's interesting because when you speak about that and the way that she wrote it, it reminds me in a way of, prior protestations on the part of President Obama, where he wanted to insist, during the IRS investigation, for example, and also during the Hillary Clinton investigation, that he was absolutely not involved in any of it, and that he, in both cases, believed that there would be no law-breaking found in any way. So perhaps, there's an effort to be on the record about this as well that Susan Rice wanted to document.
No question. I mean, it's the oddest thing in the world to send an email to yourself on Inauguration Day about a conversation held on January the 5th where the president tells the law enforcement community and the intel community, now, when you look at this Russian stuff, you need to do it by the book. That's an odd thing to be saying on January the 5th. Number one, why should he have to say that to begin with? Number two, what brought on that conversation on January the 5th? They knew they were going to be out of power just in days. They sent an email trail showing the president was instructing everybody doing it by the book. And when you look at what happened, it was an abuse of power, not by the book. So this is really odd.
It also brings to mind the New York Times story, which was written about how you know, the Obama administration was concerned. They wanted to make sure that the little, you know, tea leaves were left for the Russia investigation,
Yes.
and they lowered the ability for people to be engaged in that in terms of their, you know, classification, and they wanted to make sure that as many people as possible saw what they saw as the clues out there, that there was something untoward with the Trump campaign in Russia. Is that connected to this, do you think?
Well, they were going to leave breadcrumbs, you know, to make sure that people could follow the Russian efforts to undermine the 2016 election. What did Comey say when the president allegedly told him, I want you to do it by the book? Do you think Comey mentioned to the president that the chief source of information regarding a FISA warrant on Carter Page came from a paid operative of the Democratic Party, Mr. Steele, who was on the payroll of Fusion GPS that was being paid by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party, that the dossier came from Russian sources, very unreliable, and it still hasn't been verified, that the number 4 guy in the FBI, Mr. Orr's wife, worked at Fusion GPS, who did the research for Mr. Steele? Do you think he told the president any of that? This is the oddest conversation I can imagine. Why are they talking about doing things by the book on January the 5th? And what did Comey say when he was told to do it by the book?
Senator Graham, thank you very much. We will follow this with great interest as we have throughout. We thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
It's getting good. Senate Judiciary Committee members are pressing Susan Rice to explain by next week a newly revealed email.
She's sending herself an email talking about a conversation on January the 5th with the president, reassuring herself and I guess the president that this would be done by the book. I think that's odd and disturbing because we know that the investigation regarding the Trump campaign was anything but by the book.
And the email also indicates the Obama administration may have withheld information on the Russia probe from the Trump team. Meanwhile, there's new information on Michael Flynn's guilty plea. Who better to explain it all than former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy, who joins us from New York. All right, Andy, I've been dying to talk to you, but let's first hit Susan Rice, because it seems like she's back. I mean, she was there to save him on Benghazi, went out and lied about the deal with what caused the attack in Benghazi, and now she's back again with what certainly looks like a CYA email to herself.
Yeah, the question is which A was she seeing, it appears. And, you know, there's two interesting things about it. One is this by-the-book stuff, which you would think at the very tail end of the administration that always did it by the book, it wouldn't be necessary to tell people that things needed to be done by the book, particularly when, as Senator Graham points out, this thing was anything but done by the book, unless the book is like Rules for Radicals, right? I guess they didn't identify the book. But the other interesting thing that you point to is this holding out, they're laying the groundwork to hold out information. So President Obama wants to know over the next couple of weeks if there's any reason why we can't share with the incoming team. And, you know, you have to think about what was going on then. They were investigating Flynn at that time, and he is going to be Susan Rice's successor, who you would think she would be cooperating with and would be sharing information with. And yet they were regarding him as a criminal suspect. They were thinking about doing a Logan Act prosecution on him, which is absurd. They ultimately had the FBI go speak to him and ended up prosecuting him for false statements. So I wonder if they're laying the groundwork to not let him in on things because they're regarding him as a suspect rather than her successor.
You know, a friend of mine today reminded me of when we were in the Reagan administration and he was in there in the last few days, that usually in the last few days you're not still sending emails. And I don't know what time that email dropped. I don't know if it was it before 12 noon when... what timing? What's the timing of that?
They say 12:15, Laura, which is when she should have been clearing out her office, right? And if
no,
she's
she was out. No. 12:15. She is gone. This is Trump land after 12 o'clock, right? Andy?
Right, but she's still using government email, and I think she still had her security clearance. But I think she's creating a government document on purpose. And we know that's not always the usual thing in the Obama administration. Often they tried to not create government documents when they were doing government work. But she clearly was making a paper trail here.
Andy, also I want to ask you quickly about this this deal with Robert Porter and this whole thing with his ex-wives and accused of abuse, and the timeline that looks like it might be different from what the administration initially said, given what the FBI director said today. What's going on with these security clearances and individuals who are still working in the White House without security clearances? Is that normal?
Yeah, it's not normal for people to be working for an extended period of time at the White House without a full permanent security clearance. And it looks like what happened here, looks like the nub of the problem right now is the White House evidently said that the FBI investigation was continuing as of recently. And in fact, it looks like, according to what Director Wray says, they had wrapped that up last year.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Andy, we'll keep on this with you. Great insights as always.
Senate, re-election in the Senate in Florida. How concerned are you about the allure of President Obama, his rock star quality, and helping your opponent?
Well, I think he's going to end up turning more votes out for me than he does for Andrew, because I think folks will who may not otherwise want to vote, if they see Obama's for Andrew, they're going to want to support me, particularly given his record on things like the Iran deal, cozying up to the Castro regime, being very weak when it comes to the Maduro regime in Venezuela. So I welcome President Obama. Hell, I should be paying for his travel expenses to come down. And don't forget, we have the President of the United States coming down on October 31st to Fort Myers in Southwest Florida, and then likely come again before the election happens. And so, you look at that rally that he did for Ted Cruz in Texas, that put the race away for Ted. And I think we'll get a similar outcome here after he comes down to Florida for me.
Well, Gillum is a silver-tongued orator. I mean, that's putting it nicely. I'm trying to be a little nice today about my political opponents. But he's kind of homespun, kind of throws off the rhetoric, he tries to do the cool thing that Obama does. I don't think he doesn't do it nearly as well. But this is part of what he said last debate with you for our listeners. Let's listen.
My grandmother used to say, a hit dog will holler. And it hollered through this room. Mr. DeSantis has spoken. First of all, he's got neo-Nazis helping him out in the state. He has spoken at racist conferences. I'm not calling Mr. DeSantis a racist. I'm simply saying the racists believe he's a racist.
And, of course, our lovelies over at MSNBC, et cetera, said, oh, that was such a brilliant line. But we discovered today, there was a piece in Breitbart today that, of course, these boycotters of Israel, these anti-Israeli organizations supporting Gillum, he signed this pledge called Dream Defenders. I pledged my support to the Freedom Papers. And the Freedom Papers, of course, also advocate textbook socialist principles, the virtue of being born. Each of us has the absolute right to adequate food, shelter, etc. And it goes on. And, of course, anti-Israeli groups supporting Gillum. How do you respond?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I thought that performance helped me tremendously, because I thought it was just so outrageous. I think the average voter thought it was outrageous. And he keeps going back to that because I think the cupboard is bare on any other ideas or issues. And you're exactly right. If you want to look at somebody who's just unrepresentative of Florida's values, Andrew is the one who has aligned himself with the Dream Defenders. They are openly antagonistic to Israel. They support boycott, divest, and sanction of the state of Israel. They actually organize flash mob protests in Israel. They take special trips just to target Israel. And so, look, we're running for governor of Florida. We're not running for the mayor of the Gaza Strip. And so he's way out of step on that. And I would never accept an endorsement from a group that boycotted Israel. I would never endorse them from the debate stage like he did. just a couple months ago. And that group also says horrible things about law enforcement. They say law enforcement is racist. They say that police and prisons have no place in justice, and that law enforcement should be defunded. So that's what he says in terms of the pledge he signed. And I think that is just way outside of what is acceptable in the state of Florida. And I don't think he's ever successfully answered those questions.
Another piece out in the Tampa Bay Times just a few days ago, new Andrew Gillum documents show FBI agent might have paid for fundraising dinner. And, of course, that's the FBI agent as part of the investigation into, I guess, Florida corruption. And turns out, $4,000 worth of food and drinks for one of Gillum's fundraisers was paid for by this individual posing as a Florida real estate developer.
Well, that's right. So he said just last Sunday when we did the CNN debate, when I was confronting him about all this, oh, I'm a grown man, I pay for everything, how dare you, all this stuff. Well, then it turns out just a couple days later, there was text messages showing he acknowledged that this pricey $1,000 ticket to go see Hamilton was actually paid for by an undercover FBI agent who he thought was a local real estate developer. And then it comes out just a couple days ago that same undercover FBI agent posing as a developer underwrote an almost $5,000 fundraising dinner for Gillum's nascent governor campaign. And indeed, Andrew did not disclose that expenditure, and so he didn't even comply with Florida law. So he goes around saying that he's not been investigated or isn't being investigated. But I would ask the question, what other reason would an undercover agent have for greasing his palms with a $1,000 ticket for underwriting a pricey fundraising dinner if he wasn't investigating Gillum? That'd be the only reason you would do any of that stuff. So he is under investigation. He's been lying about a lot of this stuff, and it is starting to catch up with him.
It's sleazy politics. I'd boil it down to some really simple in these last closing days. It's just sleazy. This is sleazy politics as usual. Bribes, people dangling little benefits, and politicians jump. And they just jump. Okay, what do you need? What do you need? Yeah, I'd love to have that. Sure. It doesn't matter if it's a Hamilton ticket or a trip or restaurants. It's sleazy, corrupt politics that Tallahassee, sadly, has become known for. And if people want San Francisco in Florida, then definitely vote for Andrew Gillum. Okay, if you think San Francisco has become one of the most poorly run cities in the United States, then you better get out there and vote for Ron DeSantis. I endorsed Ron over a year ago because I saw his leadership and his vision for the state of Florida, and it's unparalleled. It's unparalleled. So don't mistake the smooth-talking Obama wannabe Gillum for good leadership. It's not. It's pathetic. And by the way, Ron, before we let you go, I got to get your take on this caravan. You heard the Scarborough absurdity. If you're concerned about the caravan, you're basically anti-Semitic. I mean, you got to diagram that sentence. But it looks like Floridians, in the poll that just came out a couple of days ago, CBS YouGov poll, shows that only 26% said that immigration from Mexico and Latin America has made life in the state better. 38% said no impact. 36% said it's made life worse, and 43% said the migrants would ultimately pose a threat to the United States. 38% no threat. That's an overall poll there. But 51% of Floridians polled said we should not try to help the migrants in the caravan. 49% said we should try to help. That's kind of a ridiculous question. I mean, we don't want anything to happen to these people. We just don't want them to come to the United States. That's a loaded question. But your view on the caravan?
Well, this is one where you cannot allow people to just illegally run across our border. And the fact of the matter is, Mexico offered them a place to stay in Mexico. They declined it. So it's not like they're just trying to move away from difficult circumstance to the nearest refuge. They've rejected refuge in Mexico because they think they have a right to overrun our border. I think that's wrong. Andrew Gillum supports the caravan coming into the United States. His running mate was out there saying yesterday that we need to welcome in the caravan into the United States. And so you couldn't have a more stark difference. I'm for borders. Andrew's for open borders. I want to support our men and women in ICE. He wants to abolish ICE.
Well, again, this is an issue that I think the American people are following very closely. Andrew Gillum's actually speaking now in Miami, and I'm sure we'll pull some sound there. Kamala Harris is stumping with him right now. So they see this race, Congressman, as absolutely critical for not just the state of Florida now, but for 2020. And so all their big guns are coming down there. So the president's coming for you. You had Pence down there. What else do you have in store for the final week?
Oh, it's going to be nonstop. I mean, we're going to be we did 4 events yesterday. We're going to be on the road doing multiple events today, and that's just what it's going to be. And, we are doing well in the actual turnout, and we're turning out the people we want to do, and we're turning out ahead of Democrats. If we keep that up, we're going to win on November 6th, and I think that'll be a great day for Florida.
Ron DeSantis, best of luck on the campaign trail. I'm sure we'll have you on TV this week. And we'll be following very closely. Again, voters all throughout the state of Florida, you're listening, get to the polls, get there early, vote, encourage everyone you know who's out there in Florida. You want to keep this prosperity going, get to the polls, vote for Ron DeSantis. Stay there. Let's go to April, Texas, line 3. April.
Hello. I just wanted to say I think it's completely delusional to include Trump in this. If this were Hillary, nobody would be blaming her, even though, they're all trying to connect this to Trump, this tragedy.
Well, let's just say it this way. Let's get real clear. Was Obama anything that he did to divide the country responsible for any of the evil stuff that happened at the hands of criminals during his time? Criminals are criminals, okay?